Hey, young man, eat my shorts. Come on, take the damn picture.
Oh, it's a video, so you're kind of out of luck.
Oh. It's all right if I turn my...
All right, it's a video. Yeah.
I remember sometimes when I was younger, and sometimes not really, kind of being afraid to like ask him for something or ask him for help with something just because I didn't know what mood he was in.
He loved to have fun, and he loved to do practical jokes and things like that.
It didn't matter what kind of mood you caught him in.
Peter Bundy could be the most generous person.
One time is when he shot a firework at my dog, at my puppy dog.
And he could throw huge tantrums.
But the thing that mystified me about him, and the thing that really informed my life, was his absolute inability to change.
But it's basically like I wanted to ask, like, did people ever feel like intimidated or scared by him as a kid? Because I certainly did.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Oh yeah, he drank a whole lot for sure. It became a drinking problem, when he would lose it. And
That's right.
we all have not so great memories of him in that category. And it also could be part of the fun.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Until it wasn't.
He can come off as a bit harsh sometimes, but he really does have a good heart, and if you just get to know him and you just spend some time with him, he really is a good person.
I would describe him as someone who was more than he appeared to be. He may be an ass or a bit, strict and rough sometimes, but he's more than that. He can be open, he can be sharing. He's very cultured and experienced and knows a lot more than he may sort of put out in a way.
Yeah.
And yeah, there's more to him than what meets the eye.
I think this will sound negative. It's probably not as negative as it might sound, but I think I am a better person because of his example in terms of how I don't want to be.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, not that I didn't take plenty of positive things from him too. But in terms of not being a dick to people, I guess.
I think a sense of perspective is vital.
A big part of who he was and how he turned out is he was an only child. He was kind of spoiled and pampered as a kid.
Do you think Dad liked being an only child?
No.
Okay.
No, he didn't.
Why was that, do you think?
Well, lots of reasons, I guess. First of all, he thought it was lonely. And he really did think it was very lonely being an only child. And, he got all the guff that there was, and all the attention that he didn't really need, and he kind of wanted to be let alone to grow up. And his mother was not well, and that was another thing that he didn't like. I mean, that made things difficult for him, because she was not well at all, and So he didn't have the freedom to do a lot of things that he wanted to do.
He didn't have any siblings that he had to get along with or compromise with or get feedback from people who were his same peer group who kind of could say, you know, you're kind of being a dick here.
Think of this, how he grew up, because he had all these aunts and uncles drinking, playing cards, cussing, bad hand, cussing and storming off to go home. So that was his kind of learned behavior in a sense. Now, some of us are able to adjust that, mature, and find better ways for ourselves. And he never did. He never really had to.
He had gone through ROTC, which is called Reserve Officer Training Corps. And so because of that ROTC, and I believe he did that in college. I don't know that he did it in high school. So my dad went through this ROTC training, and then he was a lieutenant in the Korean War, I believe that was his rank. And he worked in a MASH unit, the Mobile Army Surgical Hospitals. It wasn't something he ever spoke fondly about, the whole experience.
I knew about some of his war service because he would discuss it with my late husband. He spoke, as I think you'll find, that most people who are involved in wars don't talk about it. And he was very much that way too. My late husband was in World War II, and he was in the Philippines and Japan. And I know they used to talk at times, but it didn't, it never got down to me. And as I say, they're just some things they don't talk about. Peter never really changed. He was always a character. He was always very, he had leadership qualities.
Well, I think a lot of what bound us together, I think that all 6, used to be 7 of us, had a significant amount of bonding with each other over all the years because of him or in reaction to him. And we're still doing that right now in a sense.
Mm-hmm.
He was sometimes a difficult person to deal with, and I think that he was sometimes difficult to deal with because he was under significant stress. He had many kids. He had a very stressful job as a big hotshot lawyer in Milwaukee. And every once in a while he would just lose it. I think he did lose it with everybody. So everybody has memories of him being sometimes difficult. I also think that people have memories of him being a very charming, funny, and as I said, a generous person. I guess it depends how much of the bad side you saw in comparison with the good side. And I'm sure that people saw more of the good side and some other people saw more of the bad side. But he would definitely he could not be considered as boring. He could not be considered as boring.
I've thought about this very well, so I have a very clear idea of why and my own understanding of it for sure. But I think that for his immediate children, it was probably quite a tumultuous and difficult at times growing up. I think that the difference in age groups between all his children also would offer a very different perspective, right? So I think that I'm gathering that depending on what sort of time frame you've been brought up, which spans 2 decades, I think, between eldest and youngest child. It's a very long time. I think that from what I gather from others' experiences, Apapa was not as great as he was as a granddad. I don't necessarily think he was all that prepared for 7 children, if anyone's ever prepared for that. I don't think it necessarily he was. So I think there are many different reports between what feelings are kept from Apapa's upbringing, from Apapa's handling of different events. And everybody nowadays seems to reflect on him in, or there is some sort of, not animosity, I guess is too strong, but I think back then, fathers were much more stamp your authority, and that's the way it goes, versus now, 2020 is the year that we're recording this in. There's a much more open-minded sort of approach about parenting in general, and I guess there's all sorts of different ways, and his 7 children had, you know, a colourful life, and that would be difficult for any parent to sort of manage and handle, and could he have done it better? Well, according to some, clearly he could have, but hindsight is great, and that's fine that we're all talking about that today, but he didn't have the hindsight to base it on, so you can only sort of imagine what kind of things he was going through, and it must have been pretty tough. To me though, and it matches much more the positives that I've heard throughout the time. But even going back, you know, my mum will have stories of extreme fondness about what they used to do, how amazing of a father he was. But in the same whim, she will also have stories of, you know, how strict and severe he could be, and how stubborn is one way to put it, he could be as well, and you know, different facets of his character would be reflected differently, and depending on the experiences you've had with him. My experiences were overwhelmingly good, so I only, you know, personally can speak on that. Others will have their very different experiences, and I, you know, there is no right and wrong. There's just the way that you have experienced Apapa. It's very different as a grandchild than a child, I think, as well. So we were probably, you know, not confronted with as much of the negative stuff, and I understand that, but I cannot assume the position of negativity towards Apapa, because I was just never shown that. I hear from from various people through the grapevine, but I hear many things through the grapevine. I have to make up my own mind as well.
Deep, long-lasting relationships with his children and his wife, and you know, sometimes relationships, there's ups and downs all the time, but he was very dedicated and cared very much, even during times when you thought maybe he could have given more. It wasn't his way. He held a lot inside, and I'm sure it was very, very difficult for him when he lost his son, and he held that inside for a long time. And sometimes someone's anger, sometimes the hurt can come out that way, not meaning it. And I think that is what lived within Pete Bundy, is the hurt that he carried, in his life. He let that out sometimes in ways that he didn't know how else to let it out. And it came out sometimes in angry ways. But we all have that. But he was wise, and like anyone, he could be grumpy, or he could be fun-loving, and you never knew which one you were going to get. And if he was grumpy, you just let him be.
Yeah. What was something about Peter Bundy that people should really know about him?
Oh, goodness. He didn't open up about a lot of things.
No, we had sort of falling out, and he once again said, basically, get the fuck out. And I said, okay. And I had been staying with, do you remember my old high school girlfriend, Lisa? I was staying with her and her roommate. They had come and gotten me, and Lisa comes up and goes, hey, your dad is here, and I think you better go talk to him. Dad was just standing there with his hands in his pockets and says, you have to come with us. And I'm like, what's going on? And he says, you have to come with us. There's something terrible has happened. And I'm just like, okay, what the fuck? So we're driving along down Hampton, and he says, Karl killed himself tonight. And I was like, you know, how do you reply to something like that? So it was pretty terrible. And you're just sitting there watching that fucking cold night. You know, that was just diabolical fucking weather. It was so fucking cold. I don't even know how the hell they knew where I was. You know, I don't know what they told Mark and John.
Yeah, they didn't know about it till the next morning. That's what I heard.
I believe that's correct.
They had to go to school the next morning knowing that he was dead, though.
I know. I thought that was just horrid.
Mark skipped school and went to Big Bay and drank with his friends. He told me that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure that was different from any other day.
I remember Ed coming home at lunch because he couldn't handle it, and I went and met him out on the street. And I couldn't believe I mean, obviously they didn't know what to do, but really? Sending him to school?
Yeah, that's not cool.
And I think he realized that, you know, he didn't have February rent. He had gone by mom and dad's to say, can you help me? All mom could do was give him some hamburger from the freezer, you know, and they were on their way out to some hoo-ha event. So dad didn't have any time. And it's always, I guess, a very spontaneous thing to take your life.
I think they got tired of being parents in some ways.
I think they got worn down.
Well, yeah, exactly. And I mean, it's not easy. I get that.
I've kind of been wanting to ask this, but I'm not sure exactly how to phrase it. But do you think
Much better to take a motorboat?
But do you think Apapa gave up on Mark in terms of trying to parent him or trying? Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then, of course, the next day or a day after, I don't know, very soon he just took off and went to the cottage to escape, which is something that I think he did. If you think about it, at other times when he couldn't handle things, he would just escape. And then I remember when we all got up to the cottage and he just was freaking out and he cried. And he said, why did he have to do that? What would have pushed him to do that? And he was sobbing. And I remember that was so weird to see so much emotion from him, because frankly, all I ever saw from him as far as emotion was anger or fun happiness when he was partying or having a party or doing something he really loved. But I don't remember him showing any other emotions than that. Didn't really talk about it too much after that, I don't think. I don't think he knew how to handle it, and I don't think he found any. I remember thinking it would have been good if he and mom went to see some counseling or something, and they never did, to my knowledge.
I think the date that Karl took his own life was February 3rd, if I'm correct.
Yep. 1985.
He was quite a private person, really.
One question I want to ask you guys this is kind of like, how do you guys remember Apapa? And I know we've been talking, so maybe we've talked about this already, but like I kind of remember Apapa as just like he was my only grandfather because my dad's father passed away before I was born. So he's the only grandfather I have, and he's kind of like I almost feel like a lot of who he was and like the family that he helped raise, what has had a huge influence on me. And it's just very, I remember him in a very positive way. I don't remember him for like the shitty times that I've talked about. And I've mentioned like I've got a lot of things to be thankful for because of him. So I remember him in kind of just his best ways, and also acknowledging like, yeah, he was pretty shitty sometimes, and sometimes he was a bit afraid to be, he was a bit, it was awkward to be around him, but you know, I remember him very positively. I remember him as a very smart individual. Like at his best, he could be very fun, and he had this laugh that like you would just, it was amazing to hear. And
Yeah,
I
he had a
feel
big
like,
booming laugh.
yeah, his laugh was great.
I guess one people like for people to understand is as much as he was an ass, which he was, he also was, yeah, attentive and curious and thoughtful towards the people he cared about and he loved. And I think underneath all the frustration and attitude and temperament, underneath he genuinely cared and looked out for the people he loved. So it was difficult to be related to him, but I'm very proud to be his grandson.
Sweet. I guess I've realized how much Apapa has influenced my life, how much of an impact he's had on my life. Like I kind of mentioned it before, like Dolphin Island, the cottage, an interest in history and travel and other things. And I just kind of wish I could thank him for that, because I didn't really get the chance to thank him for that. And it's been, I don't necessarily regret it, because I mean, hindsight is of course 2020, but
yeah, there's no point in regretting it. You're right. I could not stress that enough.
Yeah, it's not really worth like thinking about, but I just always kind of think about how much of Apapa I still hold with me. Like say every time someone says the phrase "God damn it," I think of Apapa.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I just can't really ever shake the influence that Apapa has had on his uncles, because I see my uncles, mostly Egg and Dave, quite often, and it's just like this influence that Apapa's had on my life is, I'm extremely grateful for it, and I kind of just wish I had told him like, thank you for all that.